I never thought my life would come to this moment. My name is Hazel. I'm 67 years old, and I've dedicated my entire life to creating a loving family. In our Connecticut suburban home, everything once felt perfect. That changed when my son William stood in our living room and gave me an ultimatum: serve his wife or leave. What surprised everyone wasn't my tears, but my smile as I picked up my old bag. If you're curious about what happened next and what I had secretly prepared, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let me know where you're watching from, and stick around for a story about finding strength when you least expect it. After James, my husband of 40 years, passed away from a sudden heart attack 8 years ago, our family dynamics shifted dramatically. As a retired nurse who had spent decades caring for others, I found myself alone in the 4-bedroom colonial house where we had built our lives and raised our only child, William. William was always a bright, sensitive boy with his father's analytical mind and my empathetic heart. When James died, William was just starting his career at 28, and the loss hit him particularly hard. His father had been his mentor, his confidant, and his biggest supporter. The grief seemed to create a void in him that he was desperate to fill. Despite his emotional struggles, William's professional life flourished. He quickly rose through the ranks as a software engineer at a prestigious tech company in Hartford. His intelligence and dedication made him a valuable asset to his team, and his financial success gave him a sense of control that helped him cope with his grief. 3 years after James passed, William met Amanda at a corporate event. He called me that very night, sounding more animated than I had heard him in years. "Mom, I met someone special," he said, and my heart soared for him. When he brought her to Sunday dinner the following week, I noticed how he looked at her with the same admiration his father once showed me. Amanda was beautiful, ambitious, and articulate. She worked in marketing at William's company and had a way of commanding attention when she entered a room. I prepared James's famous pot roast recipe for that first dinner, wanting to welcome her properly. When I mentioned that it was a family recipe, Amanda smiled thinly and said, "I prefer a plant-based diet, actually, but don't worry about it." The comment seemed innocent enough, but something in her tone suggested she found our traditions quaint, perhaps even primitive. Still, I was determined to welcome her warmly. William deserved happiness, and if Amanda was his choice, I would embrace her as part of our family. Over the following months, I made countless efforts to bond with her, asking about her interests, inviting her for lunch, even attempting to learn about her passion for designer handbags, despite my own preference for practical items. 18 months later, they were engaged. The wedding was an elaborate affair at a countryside estate, far more extravagant than anything our family had ever done. Amanda's parents, wealthy business owners from Seattle, spared no expense. During the reception, I overheard Amanda telling her friends, "We're going to renovate that outdated house completely. Hazel can help with the smaller details, but the overall vision needs to be more contemporary." She didn't know I was standing just around the corner, clutching my champagne glass a little tighter. After their honeymoon in the Maldives, William approached me with what seemed like a thoughtful suggestion. "Mom, that big house must be so much work for you alone." He began, his expression concerned. "Amanda and I were thinking, why don't we all live together? You could have your own space, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or bills anymore." The offer was tempting. The house had become a collection of empty rooms full of memories. My arthritis was making the stairs increasingly difficult, and the property taxes kept rising. When William suggested adding his name to the deed for insurance and inheritance purposes, it seemed like a practical decision. My attorney raised some concerns, but I insisted on proceeding, though, with some specific conditions that William barely glanced at before signing. The first few months of our shared living arrangement were pleasant enough. Amanda redecorated the living room and kitchen, replacing James's old recliner and our vintage dining set with modern furniture. I told myself that change was natural and kept my sentimental items in my bedroom and the small sitting area William had designated as Mom's space. Looking back, I should have recognized the pattern forming. Each small change was presented as an improvement, each new rule as a necessary adjustment. But love for my son clouded my judgment, and I dismissed my growing concerns as the natural friction of different generations sharing a home. If only I had realized sooner what was truly happening beneath the surface of our seemingly harmonious household. By the end of our first year living together, the subtle shifts in our household dynamics had become impossible to ignore. What started as occasional suggestions from Amanda had evolved into daily directives about how I should behave in what had once been my own home. "Hazel, we'd prefer if you didn't use the kitchen between 6 and 8 in the evening. That's our cooking time," Amanda announced one day, though they rarely cooked, usually ordering meal delivery services instead. "William and I need the living room for our Netflix evenings. Perhaps you could watch your shows in your room," became another regular request, despite the fact that the living room television had been a gift from James to me on our 30th anniversary. I tried to accommodate these requests, telling myself that flexibility was important in any shared living situation. I rearranged my schedule, ate dinner earlier, and spent increasing amounts of time in my bedroom to avoid potential conflicts. When friends called to invite me to lunch or community events, I often declined, worried about disrupting the household routine Amanda had established. My attempts to maintain a warm relationship with Amanda continued despite the growing tension. I offered to teach her how to make James's famous apple pie when she mentioned hosting a dinner party. Her response was telling, "That's sweet, Hazel, but we're going for a more sophisticated menu. Perhaps you could help by staying out of the way that evening." The incident that truly opened my eyes involved my mother's engagement ring, a delicate silver band with a small but flawless diamond that had been passed down through 3 generations. I had always planned to give it to William for his future wife, but something had held me back from offering it when they got engaged. An intuition I couldn't explain at the time. One afternoon, I found Amanda going through my jewelry box while I was supposedly out at a doctor's appointment that had ended early. "Oh, Hazel," she startled. "I was just admiring your beautiful collection. William mentioned a family ring I thought it might be nice to wear for our anniversary dinner." Before I could respond, she continued, "This must be it," lifting my mother's ring. "It's a bit old-fashioned, but I could have it reset into something more modern." "That ring stays as it is," I said firmly, surprising both of us with my directness. "It belonged to my mother, and before that, my grandmother." "Of course," Amanda replied smoothly, placing it back. "I just thought, since we're family now, these heirlooms would naturally pass to me. William said as much." That evening, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. "Your mother is being unreasonable about the ring," Amanda's voice carried through the hall. "We've welcomed her into our home, and she can't even share family heirlooms." "It's her mother's ring, Amanda," William responded, his voice tired. "And you're her son. Shouldn't you have a say in family possessions? Sometimes I think she's forgotten whose house this is now." Their words stung more than I could express. "Whose house this is now?" echoed in my mind as I quietly returned to my room, avoiding the creaking floorboard in the hallway. As months passed, William's work hours grew longer. He frequently traveled for business, leaving Amanda and me alone in the house. During these periods, her behavior became even more controlling. She invited her friends over for lunch parties, where they would sit in the garden, their voices carrying through my open window, as they discussed the challenges of living with elderly parents, as if I were a burden rather than the homeowner who had welcomed them. "Honestly, Hazel is sweet, but so stuck in her ways," Amanda would say, unaware or perhaps uncaring that I could hear every word. "William feels responsible for her. You know, I'm trying to be supportive, but it's affecting our marriage having a third person always present." Her friends would make sympathetic noises and offer suggestions ranging from senior apartments to assisted living facilities, despite the fact that I was completely independent and in good health, apart from minor arthritis. Whenever I attempted to speak with William privately about the growing tension, something would interrupt us. Amanda would suddenly need his help with a work email, or his phone would ring with an urgent call that couldn't wait. On the rare occasions we did speak alone, William seemed distracted, his responses vague and non-committal. "Mom, I'm sure you're just misinterpreting things," he'd say. "Amanda has your best interests at heart. She's just more direct than we are." The most alarming development came when Amanda took it upon herself to reorganize my personal belongings while I was attending a funeral for an old nursing colleague. I returned to find my closet completely rearranged with several bags of clothing set aside for donation, without my knowledge or consent. "These outdated styles were cluttering your space," Amanda explained when I confronted her. "I've left you all the practical pieces. The rest were just collecting dust." Among the items she had designated for removal were the cashmere sweater James had given me for our last Christmas together, and the blue dress I had worn to William's college graduation. Each piece held memories that Amanda had decided were dispensable. It was becoming increasingly clear that this wasn't simply about different living preferences or generational gaps. This was a systematic effort to diminish my presence in the home, to reduce my autonomy, and erase the physical reminders of my history there. What troubled me most wasn't Amanda's behavior. People's true natures eventually reveal themselves, but William's growing complicity in my erasure. The son who had once cherished our family traditions now seemed embarrassed by them. The boy who had proudly introduced me to his college friends now barely acknowledged my presence when his colleagues visited. Something fundamental had shifted, and I was beginning to realize that accommodation and patience wouldn't be enough to address it. As I retrieved my treasured items from the donation bags that night, I made a decision to start documenting these incidents. Not out of pettiness or revenge, but because I needed clarity. Was I truly becoming the burden Amanda described to her friends? Or was something else happening in the home I had lovingly maintained for 45 years? The situation reached its breaking point during the elaborate preparations for Amanda's 35th birthday. What should have been a joyous family celebration instead became the catalyst for the most painful confrontation I'd ever experienced with my son. 2 weeks before the party, Amanda presented me with a detailed list of tasks she expected me to complete. "Since you're home all day anyway," she explained with her characteristic dismissive smile. The list included everything from hand-addressing 60 invitations to preparing 4 different types of finger foods that required special ingredients from 3 different specialty stores across town. Despite feeling a persistent ache in my knees from the changing weather, I threw myself into the preparations. I wanted to prove, perhaps more to myself than to Amanda or William, that I was still valuable to this family unit. I spent days shopping, cooking, and arranging flowers according to Amanda's exacting specifications, determined to make her birthday special. The evening of the party arrived, and the house looked magnificent. I had followed Amanda's Pinterest board to the letter, creating a modern elegance theme with white orchids, crystal accents, and subtle gold touches throughout the main floor. Guests began arriving at 7, exclaiming over the transformation of our traditionally decorated colonial into what one of Amanda's friends called a proper contemporary entertainment space. I had dressed carefully in a navy blue dress I'd purchased specifically for the occasion, hoping to blend appropriately with the sophisticated crowd. After greeting the first few arrivals, I noticed Amanda directing a photographer in the living room. "We're doing family photos before everyone arrives," she announced. William stood beside her, handsome in his charcoal suit, looking slightly uncomfortable. I moved toward them, but Amanda's hand went up in a stopping motion. "Oh, Hazel, these are just couple shots, and then some with my parents. We'll do extended family photos another time." The distinction was clear. I was not considered immediate family, despite being William's mother. I retreated to the periphery, helping the catering staff arrange the gourmet appetizers I had spent days preparing. During dinner, I discovered I had been seated at a table with Amanda's great-aunt and 2 elderly neighbors, the senior table, as one of Amanda's bridesmaids referred to it while directing guests to their assigned seating. From my position at the far end of our transformed dining room, I could barely see William, who was seated at the head table with Amanda and her parents. The true humiliation came during the toasts. After several friends had shared flattering anecdotes about Amanda, she rose to thank everyone for coming. She looked radiant in her designer dress, commanding attention, as she always did. "I want to especially thank my wonderful husband for this incredible evening," she began, raising her glass toward William. "And also Hazel, who helped with some of the preparations." Some of the preparations. 3 weeks of exhausting work reduced to an afterthought. But what came next was worse. "You know, having Hazel live with us has been an educational experience," Amanda continued, her voice taking on a performative quality. "Just last week, she tried to convince me that online banking isn't secure, and I should keep going to a physical bank branch." Laughter rippled through the room. "I guess some people just can't keep up with the times." The story wasn't even accurate. I had simply mentioned that I preferred speaking to a teller for certain transactions, but the damage was done. I had become the punchline, the old-fashioned mother-in-law who couldn't understand the modern world. I maintained my composure through dessert, then quietly excused myself, claiming a headache. No one noticed as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, my knees protesting each step. Once inside, I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling slightly as I removed the earrings James had given me for our 25th anniversary. Through the floor vents came the sounds of continued celebration, and later as guests departed, I could hear William and Amanda's voices in the kitchen below. Their tones were tense, argumentative. "You didn't need to embarrass her like that." William's voice carried faintly. "Don't start this again," Amanda replied sharply. "I barely mentioned her. If she's that sensitive, that's not my problem." "She worked for weeks on this party for you." "Because she has nothing else to do, William. We need to talk about this situation. It's not working." "What do you mean?" His voice sounded wary. "I mean your mother. Living here. It's affecting us, affecting me. I can't be myself in my own home." "This is her home too, Amanda." "No, it's not. Not anymore. It's our home now, and she's a guest who's overstayed her welcome." Her voice became lower, but still audible. "It's time to make a choice, William. It's either her or me." The ultimatum hung in the air, followed by the sound of a door slamming. Footsteps crossed the house, then silence. I sat motionless in the dark, Amanda's words echoing in my mind. A guest who's overstayed her welcome. In the home where I had raised my son, nursed my husband through his final illness, tended gardens through 45 changing seasons. Something shifted inside me that night. Not just sadness or anger, but a profound awakening. I thought about my own mother, Catherine, who had faced widowhood 20 years before me. She had never allowed anyone to diminish her dignity, not even during her final years when she needed physical care. "Self-respect isn't selfish, Hazel," she used to tell me. "It's necessary." As moonlight filtered through my curtains, illuminating the family photos on my dresser, I made a decision. I would not remain in a situation where I was treated as an unwelcome burden. I would not force my son to choose between his wife and his mother, but neither would I continue to be erased from my own life. With a clarity I hadn't felt in years, I began preparations that night. First, I retrieved my important documents: birth certificate, social security card, insurance information, from the fire safe in my closet. Next, I called my sister Florence, who lived in the neighboring town of Glastonbury. Despite the late hour, she answered on the third ring. "Flo, it's Hazel," I said softly. "I need to ask a favor." After explaining the situation, Florence immediately offered her guest room for as long as I needed it. "It's about time," she said firmly. "I've been worried about you in that house with her." Over the next few days, while William was at work and Amanda was occupied with her post-party social media updates, I quietly organized my essential belongings. I visited my bank to ensure my separate accounts were in order and made an appointment with Susan James, an attorney who had helped several of my nursing friends with elder law issues. What Amanda and William didn't know was that I had been preparing for this possibility for weeks, ever since overhearing Amanda discussing senior living options with her mother on the phone. The overnight bag I would eventually take with me wasn't hastily packed in emotional distress. It was carefully prepared by a woman who had finally remembered her own worth. The morning after Amanda's birthday party, I came downstairs to find her sitting at the kitchen island, typing rapidly on her laptop. She barely glanced up when I entered. "Good morning," I offered, maintaining the politeness that had been ingrained in me since childhood. "Morning," she replied, without looking away from her screen. "There's coffee in the pot." I poured myself a cup, noticing that she had rearranged the kitchen cabinets yet again. My favorite mug was now on the highest shelf, just out of comfortable reach for me. "I've been thinking," Amanda said, suddenly closing her laptop. "We need to establish some clearer household guidelines now that the party is over. I've made a list." She slid a printed document across the countertop. The header read, "Updated House Rules and Expectations." As I scanned the list, my hand tightened around my coffee cup. The rules included restricted hours for kitchen use, a requirement to give 24-hour notice before having any visitors, and a stipulation that I should text before entering common areas if Amanda was working from home. "These seem quite restrictive," I said, carefully placing the paper back on the counter. "They're necessary boundaries," Amanda replied. "William agrees that we need more structure." I doubted William had seen this list, but I simply nodded and took my coffee to the small table by the window, a corner that had become my unofficial territory in the increasingly hostile household. Around noon, I heard the unexpected sound of William's car in the driveway. He rarely came home for lunch, particularly after a late night. Through the window, I could see him sitting in the driver's seat for several minutes, his expression tense as he appeared to be rehearsing something in his mind. When he finally entered the house, he called out, "Mom, Amanda, can you both come to the living room, please?" I found him standing rigidly by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, in a posture reminiscent of his father. Amanda entered shortly after me, her expression a mixture of anticipation and determination. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," William began, his voice unnaturally formal, "about our living situation." My heart sank. Even before he continued, I knew what was coming. "Mom, you know I love you," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "But Amanda and I need to establish our home on our terms. The current arrangement isn't working for us." Amanda moved to stand beside him, her hand possessively on his arm, her expression triumphant. "What are you saying, William?" I asked, though I already knew. He cleared his throat. "I'm saying that we need changes. Either you need to fully accept Amanda's role in this household, including following the new house rules and—" He paused, seemingly searching for the right words, "and serving as more of a supportive presence rather than expecting equal authority. Or if that doesn't work for you, maybe it would be best if you found another living arrangement." The words hung in the air between us. Serve his wife or leave? The son I had raised, the boy who had once made me Mother's Day cards, proclaiming me world's best mom, was now delivering an ultimatum clearly crafted by the woman beside him. In that moment, 40 years of memories flashed through my mind. William's first steps across this very room, his graduation celebration in the backyard, the quiet evenings after James died when we would sit together in companionable silence, both processing our grief. What surprised all of us, myself included, was my reaction. Instead of tears or protests, I felt an unexpected sense of calm clarity wash over me. I smiled. The smile wasn't bitter or angry. It contained a mixture of sadness for what had been lost and relief that the pretense was finally over. William looked taken aback, clearly having prepared for a very different response. I understand, I said simply, my voice steady. Without further discussion, I walked to the hall closet and retrieved the overnight bag I had packed 3 days earlier. William's eyes widened when he saw it. You already knew, he stammered. I've been listening, William, more carefully than you might think. Amanda's expression shifted from triumph to confusion. This was not following her script. Mom, wait, William said, his rehearsed confidence faltering. We can talk about this. I didn't mean right this minute. I think now is perfect timing, I replied, still maintaining that calm smile. Sometimes clarity comes when you least expect it. I picked up my bag and walked toward the door, pausing briefly beside my son. I love you, William. That will never change. Amanda started to say something, but I had already turned away, walking out the front door with my head held high. No arguments, no begging, no desperate attempts to change minds. Just the quiet dignity my mother had modeled for me decades ago. As I placed my bag in the trunk of my car, the sensible sedan James and I had purchased together 10 years earlier, I could see William watching from the living room window, his expression a mixture of shock and something that looked remarkably like respect. The drive to Florence's house took exactly 27 minutes. With each mile that passed, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders, a burden I hadn't fully recognized until it was gone. By the time I turned into my sister's driveway, I was breathing more freely than I had in years. Florence's 2-story Victorian home had always represented a sanctuary of sorts. Unlike my traditional colonial, her house was colorfully eclectic, filled with treasures from her travels as a former flight attendant. The wraparound porch welcomed me as I pulled into the driveway, and Florence herself appeared at the door before I had even turned off the engine. At 65, my younger sister remained vibrant and independent, her silver hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her face. She rushed down the steps, concern evident in her expression. You really did it, she said, embracing me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Hazel. Inside, over cups of chamomile tea at her kitchen table, I recounted the confrontation in detail. Florence listened intently, her expression darkening with each new revelation. That manipulative little... she began before catching herself. Sorry, but the way she's treated you in your own home, and William allowing it, I never thought I'd see the day. He's not entirely to blame, I said, surprising myself with my own forgiveness. Amanda is very skilled at getting what she wants, and he's been vulnerable since James died. Florence shook her head. You're too kind as always, but enough about them for now. Tell me about your plan. You said you've been preparing for this. I smiled, feeling a flicker of pride in my foresight. 3 weeks ago, I consulted Susan James. You remember her, James's colleague's wife? She's an elder law attorney now. Florence nodded, leaning forward with interest. When William asked me to add his name to the deed years ago, I did agree, but with conditions he barely noticed when signing the papers. Susan helped me include a clause that if I was ever asked to leave the property, I would be entitled to 75% of its current market value. You didn't, Florence exclaimed, a slow smile spreading across her face. I did, I confirmed. Susan called it an expectation of lifetime residence provision. At the time, I never imagined we'd need it. I thought it was just legal formality. So, what happens now? William has 30 days to either buy out my share at current market value, or the house goes on the market, I explained. Susan sent the official notification this morning right after I texted her that I had left. What about your belongings, your furniture, Mom's china? Florence asked, practical as always. The legal notice includes permission for me to retrieve all personal property within the next 2 weeks with a sheriff's deputy present if necessary. The thought of needing official supervision to collect my own belongings was painful, but Susan had insisted on including that protection. We were interrupted by the shrill ring of Florence's landline. She glanced at the caller ID and raised an eyebrow. "It's your house number." I hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll take it." William's voice came through immediately tense and confused. "Mom, where are you? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, William. I'm at Aunt Florence's." "You just left. We need to talk about this rationally. I didn't mean for you to just walk out." "What did you expect, William?" I asked gently. "That I would choose to stay and be treated as a servant in my own home." "That's not what I meant," he protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Amanda and I just need some adjustments to the living arrangements." "I understand," I replied, maintaining my calm. "And I've made the adjustment that works best for me." "But where will you live? What about your things? This is all so sudden." I could hear the genuine concern in his voice beneath the confusion and defensiveness. My son was still in there somewhere behind the man who had been willing to deliver that ultimatum. "I have a plan, William. Everything is being taken care of." "What plan? Mom, please just come home and we can work this out." "Has Amanda received any mail for me today?" I asked, changing the subject. "What, I don't know? What does that have to do with anything?" "She will," I said simply. "Tomorrow, probably. I suggest you both read it carefully." After a moment of silence, William's voice returned wary now. "What have you done, Mom?" "What you and Amanda forced me to do," I replied without rancor. "I've protected myself." The conversation ended shortly after, with William promising to call again the following day. As I placed the receiver back in its cradle, Florence handed me a glass of her homemade lemonade, now spiked with a splash of vodka. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her own glass. "And to remembering our own worth," I added. The next morning brought a flurry of texts from William, ranging from confused to panicked, as the legal notification was apparently delivered. By afternoon, the messages had turned accusatory. "How could you do this behind our backs? This is our home, too." By evening, the tone had shifted again. "Amanda is furious. She says you planned this all along." I responded only once, writing, "I planned to live peacefully in my home until I died. The contingency plan was only necessary when that became impossible." Over the next few days, I focused on self-care and healing. Florence's guest room became my sanctuary, its pale blue walls and ocean-themed decor soothing my frayed nerves. I slept better than I had in months, no longer tensing at every creak in the house, wondering if Amanda was rearranging my belongings again. Florence, ever the social butterfly, helped me reconnect with old nursing colleagues I'd lost touch with during my years of isolation. A small gathering in her garden that weekend brought 4 of my former hospital friends back into my life, their warm embraces and understanding nods confirming that I wasn't overreacting to my situation. My daughter-in-law tried something similar, Margaret, my former supervisor, confided. "Thought she could edge me out of family decisions. Had to set some firm boundaries early on." While I rebuilt these connections, William's communications continued to evolve. The initial shock and anger gave way to negotiation attempts. "Mom, can we work something out without lawyers? This house has been in our family for generations." When I didn't respond, his messages became more desperate. "Amanda says we can't afford to buy you out at current market value. The housing market has exploded since Dad died." Still, I maintained my silence, following Susan's advice to let the legal process unfold without emotional entanglement. Amanda, meanwhile, refused to contact me directly, though she sent several demanding texts to Florence's phone when she couldn't reach me. "Tell Hazel this is completely unreasonable. We added upgrades to that house. She's being vindictive." 6 days after leaving, I met with a real estate agent recommended by Susan. Lisa Bennett had specialized in helping seniors transition from family homes for over 20 years and understood the emotional complexity of my situation. "The Colonial on Maple Street," she said, recognition dawning as I described the property. "That's a prime location. With 4 bedrooms and that double lot we're looking at around $675 to $1,000, in today's market, possibly more with multiple offers. The figure momentarily took my breath away. James and I had purchased the house for $120,000 in 1982. Even accounting for the renovations we'd made over the years, the increase was substantial. My 75% share would provide more than enough financial security for whatever the next chapter of my life might hold. That evening, Florence invited her book club friends for dinner, insisting that expanding my social circle would be therapeutic. Among the guests was Carl Whitman, a 70-year-old retired English professor whose kind eyes and thoughtful questions immediately put me at ease. We discovered a shared love of mystery novels and historical documentaries, exchanging recommendations as the evening progressed. When he asked about my situation, I gave a simplified version, not wanting to burden a new acquaintance with the full complexity. His response surprised me. My late wife's favorite quote was from Maya Angelou. He said, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Sounds like you finally believed what your daughter-in-law was showing you. The wisdom of his words stayed with me that night as I prepared for bed. Perhaps my greatest mistake had been refusing to see Amanda clearly from the beginning, making excuses for behavior that should have raised serious concerns. The next morning, exactly 1 week after I had walked out of my home with a single bag, William appeared on Florence's doorstep. He looked disheveled with shadows under his eyes, suggesting several sleepless nights. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "Just us." Florence gave me a questioning look, and I nodded. "It's okay, Flo. We'll use the porch." Seated on Florence's wicker chairs, surrounded by her potted geraniums, William and I faced each other as the morning sun created patterns through the porch railings. "I received the legal notice," he began. "Mom, I had no idea about that clause in the deed." "You should have read what you were signing," I replied gently. "Your father always taught you that." William winced at the mention of James. "I know, I just trusted that it was straightforward." "Trust works both ways, William. I trusted that you would never ask me to leave my home." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Things just escalated." "They escalated because you allowed them to," I said, keeping my voice kind but firm. "Every time Amanda pushed a boundary, you stayed silent. Every time she diminished me, you looked away." "She's my wife," he said, as if that explained everything. "And I'm your mother. Neither role should require the erasure of the other." We sat in silence for several moments, the only sound coming from a cardinal singing in Florence's maple tree. Finally, William spoke again. "Amanda is furious about the legal notice. She says you tricked us." "I protected myself," I corrected. "There's a difference. She wants to fight it in court." I nodded, unsurprised. "That's her right. Susan assures me the provision is legally sound, but Amanda can certainly try." William ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of James that my heart ached momentarily. "What do you want, Mom? Really? Do you want the house back? Is this about punishing Amanda?" The question deserved careful consideration, and I took a moment before answering. "What I wanted was to age with dignity in the home I built with your father. That's no longer possible." I met his eyes directly. "This isn't about punishment, William. It's about consequences. Choices have them even when we don't anticipate what they'll be." In the weeks following my departure, I focused on rebuilding not just my living situation, but my sense of self. Florence's home provided temporary shelter, but I knew I needed to establish my own space again, somewhere that would be truly mine, without the weight of painful recent memories. With Susan's guidance, I began exploring housing options that would suit my needs: a single-level residence, preferably in a community with other active seniors, but not a full retirement facility. I wasn't ready for that level of change, and my health certainly didn't require it. Meanwhile, William's understanding of our situation was evolving in unexpected ways. Our conversation on Florence's porch seemed to have triggered something in him. A recognition, perhaps, of how far he had strayed from the values James and I had taught him. 10 days after I left, he called with a surprising request. "Mom, I'd like to come help you retrieve your things from the house. Just me, not Amanda. She's visiting her parents in Seattle this weekend." I hesitated, wondering if this was a strategy they had devised together. "The legal agreement allows me 2 weeks to collect my belongings." "I know," he said quickly. "This isn't about the legal stuff. I want to help. It's the right thing to do." After consulting with Susan, who suggested having Florence present as well, I agreed. That Saturday morning, William met us at the Colonial with a rented moving truck he had arranged at his own expense. The house felt different as we entered, colder somehow despite the warm May weather. Amanda had already made additional changes in my brief absence, replacing family photos with abstract artwork and moving furniture to eliminate the reading nook I had loved. Working methodically, we began with my bedroom. William seemed shocked at how efficiently I identified what was truly important to me. My jewelry photo albums, the quilt my grandmother had made, select pieces of furniture with sentimental value. Much of what I had accumulated over decades, I now chose to leave behind. "You don't want the dining room set?" he asked, confused. "Dad refinished it for your 20th anniversary." "I'll be moving into a smaller place," I explained. "I'm keeping what matters most and letting go of the rest." As we worked, William became increasingly quiet, his expression thoughtful as he carefully wrapped photo frames and heirloom pieces in bubble wrap. In James's old office, he paused before a shelf of leather-bound books. "Dad's collection," he murmured. "I'd forgotten how many first editions he had." "You should keep them," I said. "He would want you to have them." William shook his head. "No, they're yours. He collected them for you both to enjoy." By mid-afternoon, we had filled the truck with the items I had selected. Far less than either William or Florence had expected. As William secured the last box, he turned to me with an expression I hadn't seen since before Amanda entered our lives. Open, vulnerable, reminiscent of the boy who had once sought my guidance for every important decision. "I messed up, didn't I?" he said quietly. "Really badly." I could have agreed immediately, could have seized the moment to emphasize his mistakes. Instead, I asked, "What makes you say that?" "Seeing all these things, these memories, helping pack up your life from the house where you raised me." He gestured at the Colonial behind us. "Dad would be so disappointed in me." "Your father loved you unconditionally," I reminded him. "As do I. But he would have never let anyone treat you the way I allowed Amanda to treat you." The admission hung in the air between us. For the first time, William was acknowledging not just that there had been tension or misunderstandings, but that Amanda's behavior had been fundamentally wrong, and that he had enabled it. "I don't know how to fix this," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Amanda and things aren't good between us right now. This situation with the house with you leaving, it's exposed problems I've been ignoring for a long time." "Those aren't problems I can solve for you, William," I said gently. "Those are decisions you'll need to make for yourself." "But we could lose the house," he said, concern creeping back into his tone. "Perhaps," I acknowledged. "Or perhaps this is an opportunity to reassess what really matters. A house is just a structure, William. The memories travel with us." We parted that day with a tentative hug. Not the full reconciliation that might have made for a neater narrative, but a small step toward healing. As Florence and I followed the moving truck to a storage facility where I would keep my belongings until finding permanent housing, she gave me a sidelong glance. "You're handling this with more grace than I could muster," she admitted. "If it were me, I'd be tempted to make them squirm a bit more." I smiled at my sister's characteristic frankness. It's not about making anyone squirm, Flo. It's about reclaiming my dignity and my future. And what does that future look like now? She asked. It was a question I had been contemplating extensively. With the proceeds from my share of the house, I would have financial security few women my age enjoyed. The possibilities were both exhilarating and somewhat intimidating. I'm thinking about the retirement community near the river, I said. The one with the individual cottages and the community center. And maybe some traveling. I've always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest. Hazel Stevens, independent woman of mystery, Florence teased. James would be proud. That night, I received a text from William. Thank you for today. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For everything. It wasn't a solution to the complex legal and emotional situation we still faced, but it was acknowledgement, a first step toward whatever our new relationship might become. 6 months after walking out of my colonial home with a single bag, I stood in the sunlit living room of my new cottage at Riverside Gardens, a retirement community for active seniors. The space was smaller than my previous home, but perfectly suited to my needs. A single-story 2-bedroom cottage with large windows overlooking a community garden and the Connecticut River beyond. Around me were carefully selected treasures from my previous life. James's favorite reading chair reupholstered in a cheerful blue fabric. The antique clock his parents had given us as a wedding gift. Family photographs arranged in new frames on custom shelving. The space felt both familiar and fresh, a physical representation of my new chapter. The sale of the Colonial had concluded 2 months earlier after William and Amanda realized they truly couldn't afford to buy out my share. The housing market had indeed boomed, and my portion of the proceeds provided more financial security than I had ever anticipated. My attorney Susan had negotiated brilliantly, ensuring that all my rights were protected while allowing William and Amanda to receive fair compensation for the improvements they had made to the property. The young family who purchased the house, a doctor, her professor husband, and their 2 small children, had fallen in love with its character and history. When they contacted me to ask about the garden I had cultivated for decades, wondering if I would share information about what was planted, where I felt a sense of rightful succession. The home would continue to shelter a growing family, just as it had sheltered mine. William and Amanda's marriage had not survived the upheaval. The stress of the housing situation had merely exposed deeper fissures in their relationship. 3 months after I left, William called to tell me they were separating. It wasn't just about you, Mom, he explained. Though that was the catalyst. Once I started really seeing how she treated you, I couldn't help noticing how she treated others too. Wait staff, store clerks, even my colleagues. There was a pattern I had been willfully ignoring. Amanda had moved back to Seattle to be near her parents while William had taken a temporary apartment near his office. Our relationship was healing gradually through weekly phone calls and occasional dinners at neutral locations. He had apologized fully without qualifications during one particularly emotional evening. I lost sight of who I was, he admitted. After Dad died, I think I was so desperate to build a new family that I ignored all the warning signs. I had forgiven him truly and completely, though we both understood that trust would take longer to rebuild. I maintained clear boundaries, not allowing discussions of him moving into my new home, temporarily, or managing my finances to make things easier for you. I loved my son, but I had learned the importance of protecting my independence. My own life had blossomed in unexpected ways. Through a senior advocacy group I had joined at Riverside Gardens, I began volunteering twice weekly, helping other elderly individuals navigate housing challenges and family conflicts. My nursing background and recent experiences made me uniquely qualified to offer both practical advice and emotional support. Florence remained a steadfast presence, visiting often and including me in her active social circle. It was through her book club that my friendship with Carl Whitman had developed into something deeper. We enjoyed weekly dinner dates, museum exhibitions, and long conversations about everything from classic literature to current politics. At our age, we both valued companionship without feeling pressured to define our relationship in traditional terms. On this particular autumn morning, as sunlight streamed through my new windows, I was preparing for a special visit. William had asked if he could bring someone to meet me. Jennifer, a grief counselor he had been seeing professionally at first, then socially. Their relationship was new and tentative, but he wanted my impression of her. "She's nothing like Amanda," he had assured me over the phone. "She listens, really listens, and she's helped me understand a lot about why I made the choices I did." The fact that he wanted my opinion represented a significant shift in our relationship, a return to the days when he had valued my insight. It wasn't about approval or permission, but about including me in his life in a meaningful way again. As I arranged cookies on a plate for their visit, I reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. The pain of being treated as disposable in my own home had transformed into an unexpected liberation. By walking away with dignity, rather than staying to fight or plead, I had reclaimed not just my legal rights, but my sense of self-worth. The lesson had been difficult, but profound self-respect is never selfish. Standing up for yourself doesn't diminish your love for others. Rather, it establishes the foundation for healthier relationships. My mother, Catherine, had tried to teach me this decades ago, and I had finally embodied her wisdom. True family, whether by blood or by choice, supports growth rather than demanding servitude. It celebrates independence alongside connection, recognizing that love thrives best when everyone's dignity remains intact. The doorbell rang, interrupting my reflections. Through the window, I could see William standing on my small porch, a bouquet of daisies in one hand and a nervous smile on his face. Beside him was a woman about his age, with kind eyes and a warm expression. As I moved to welcome them, I felt immense gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought me here. By losing what I thought I needed to keep, my family home, my role as the accommodating mother, I had found what I truly wanted, a life of authenticity, dignity, and genuine connection. For anyone watching who might be facing their own difficult family dynamics or questioning their worth in later years, remember that it's never too late to recognize your value. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and ultimately for others, is to pick up your bag and walk toward a future where you are truly respected. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to know in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to preserve your dignity? How did you find the courage to stand up for yourself when it mattered most? Please like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories about finding strength through life's unexpected challenges, and share this with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a much better story.